So tell us why you're coming over and putting on this concert in Plattsburgh. I guess it's next Friday, so it'll be a week from when folks see this.
Well, I'm really glad to be here in Plattsburgh, New York, and come and talk a little bit about Pete Seeger and the wonderful tribute that we're having for Pete right here in Plattsburgh. And I was invited to come over here and talk about Pete because there is a big interest in trying to keep Pete's music alive with his passing. The way that I felt about it was that Pete Seeger was able to catch our ears but also touch our hearts. And when he touched our hearts, he made a space for himself in our bodies, in our souls. So when we would sing a song about Pete or tell a story or remember a concert that we went to, there would be that little bit of Pete there. And with his passing, I think people feel a little hole that's in their heart, and they need to fill that hole. And the way that hole can be filled is by people singing the songs that Pete sang and remembering Pete by getting together, singing together, sharing ideas. And this is happening all over the world, from Israel to over in Europe and to California and over in Vermont, and I'm really glad to say right here in Plattsburgh, New York. And we're going to get together, and I'm going to help facilitate that night. I'll be singing some of the songs and telling stories from my own experience with Pete, but a lot of people will be able to sing along, and maybe they'll tell a story or two, and that's why I'm here.
How do you know Pete? How many years have you known Pete, and how did you first meet, and how did you come to know him?
Well, the way that we met was really funny. I've known him since I was about 19 years old, and what happened, well, of course, like most people who are trying to learn how to play the banjo, you learn from Pete Seeger's book, and you go to his concerts. And I even got involved with the sloop Clearwater, the boat that sails up and down the Hudson River here in New York. But I was shy. I was a young teenager, so I really, aside from just shaking his hand one time or something, I didn't really know him. But he was doing a concert in Central Park with Arlo Guthrie. And that same day, my mother and my two sisters, one Lisa and one Tina, I think that they were about 10 and 9 or so, they went out to New York to see some of the museums. And they saw all the blankets all set up. I said, "What's going on?" "Oh, Pete Seeger's going to be doing a concert with Arlo Guthrie." Well, Lisa, she decided that I must be backstage with Pete Seeger. After all these albums in the house and pictures of Pete, I must know him. So she went over and somehow talked her way backstage with Tina. The two of them, Tina and Lisa, got backstage, and there was Pete and Toshi, and they talked about me, I guess. I wasn't there. I went to that concert that night, and Pete said the next day, he said something like this. He says, "We're going to have a big festival on Hoboken, New Jersey. Everybody come." So I had done that before, put my banjo on my back, and I went down there. A few young people were all gathered around playing some music, and all of a sudden I started playing along, and who comes over but Pete Seeger himself? Comes over with his big 12-string guitar, and he's smiling and playing along. And I was shocked. I didn't really know what to say, and finally the music stopped, and he looked at me and he said, "And who are you?" And I said, "My name's Rik Palieri." And he cocked his head in that iconic voice, said, "Rick, I met your sisters yesterday." I had no idea. He said, "They told me that you were a good banjo player. Why don't we go up on stage and play a couple of tunes?" And he brought me up on stage, and for that rest of that concert, I was up there with him and some of the other, what we call the sloop singers, and that's how I met Pete Seeger.
That's incredible. How did he influence you through the years as a musician?
Well, as a musician, of course, by just his music, writing the books about the banjo, writing the books about his life, it made me want to do something with my life. So not just play the music, but I wanted to reach out to communities. And I started traveling at a young age and did over 1,000 schools across the United States, and then lived in Europe and so forth. But Pete was sending me letters the whole time. He would be sending me these little mentoring letters. And when he was really thinking of you, he would put a leaf in it. And there would be a leaf in it, and that meant that I'm going to tell you something important. So I have about 69 of those letters still at the house, and I look through them every once in a while. And every time that you got a letter from Pete, it was a joyous occasion. He followed me when I was out on the road tours. You know, general delivery. I would get a letter from Pete Seeger. Living up in the high mountains of Poland, there was a letter from Pete Seeger. So all throughout my life. Now, the whole thing that I want you folks to understand, I'm just one of many thousands of people that Pete looked after. He had all of these people. There was one young fella from over in Italy who wrote him and wanted to learn about his 12-string guitar. So you know what Pete did? He sent him an old guitar to repair. He said, here's one that's broken. See if you can fix it. So that's what I mean. Pete reached out to all of us, and this is our time to give back to Pete. I think that it's important that all of us who love Pete Seeger find a way that we can go out and celebrate his life and song and story.
And you mentioned being on the road. You were on the road extensively just this past summer, basically following the Almanac Trail, Pete and other singers from more than a half century ago.
Well, you know, in one of Pete's books, his early book, The Incomplete Folk Singer, he had a paragraph about this tour that he did with Woody Guthrie and the Almanac Singers. Now, the Almanac Singers, the original ones were Woody Guthrie, Mill Lampell, Lee Hayes, and Pete. Of course, as the years went by, a lot of other people got involved too. But that early core group decided that they were singing peace songs. They were always singing songs about freedom, about creating a better world. But they also got involved in the labor movement, especially for trying to get the word out about the CIO. And they, in 1941, they all got into a blue Buick, and they went across the United States singing in union halls and spreading the gospel of union music. I wrote Pete a letter about 30 years ago, and he wrote me back right away with a detailed description of everything he could remember from that time period. And I tried to put that tour together when I was young, but I didn't have enough experience. I didn't know enough about unions. I had a good idea, but I had no way of pulling it off. And so that letter sat in my files for about 30 years. And then I was playing with a fellow named George Mann, who lives over in Ithaca, New York. And George had the union experience, and he looked at Pete's letter and he said, "Rick, I think we can pull this off." So I went back to Pete, and we sat down and we did some extensive interviews together. And we used those interviews to create a CD called the Almanac Trail. And then I went to the Woody Guthrie archive. It just moved out to Tulsa, but it was still in Mount Kisco, New York, and worked with Nora Guthrie. And we went through all the files from 1941 and found out as much information as we could. Read letters from Woody to Pete, from Pete to Mill Lampell and Lee Hayes, to Alan Lomax, everybody getting advice, the union leaders. And George and I put together this incredible tour, and we retraced that 1941 tour. 9,000 miles, 24 shows in 5 weeks. I'm very proud of it. And that's one of the reasons that I got this banjo, was to remind me of that trip. And the Deering Company, Greg Deering, who's a big Pete Seeger fan, he made up a few of these heads that had Pete's logo on it. It says, "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender." And as a gift, the company put this on my banjo. It's a little bittersweet having Pete's logo on my banjo, but it reminds me, and hopefully reminds you, of the man, Pete Seeger, and that this is the time to sing his song and celebrate his story.
And it must have been special in a way that you were able to put on those concerts this year with Pete's passing now in 2014. You mentioned you got together with him last fall, one last time, appropriately. You had a conversation in your pickup truck. Was he happy that you had followed in his footsteps and made that tour?
Well, Pete always, he liked the way I told stories. So we would sit together and we would swap tales. We'd sit across the table and I would tell a story and then Pete would tell a story. And that's what we did the later part of our relationship. Because in the beginning, you know, I was just a young kid and learning things. And then as I went through life and I wrote a book and started really kind of following some of the guidelines that Pete had set out, doing my own TV show, The Songwriter's Notebook, Pete came on my show 4 times. You know, he believed in people doing things. And when he saw someone who was doing something that he felt was important, he was there for support, you know, whether it was me or a little festival that was just getting going or somebody who was writing a book, somebody who was making a film. He was always there to give their some support. And that's what I feel I feel a little bit of the need now to give back and to let other people know the wonderful things that Pete did, and also to try to encourage them with the projects that they're doing, and the way that Pete would encourage me. Of course, I'm not a big star or anything like that, but it's still, I think it's important that we encourage each other.
Rik, thank you. Could you play a little bit for us and tell us what you're going to play? It's from the soundtrack from the Almanac Trail.
This is, I think, it's an old song that Pete sang on that original Talkin' Union, 78. That was probably the most important album that the Almanacs did in some ways, because it went to union halls all across the country. And this song was written by Jim Garland. And remember that the unions were having a hard time back in 1941. A lot of strikes were going on. And so he was kind of putting his philosophy out, and it's called I Don't Want Your Millions, Mister, and one of the great labor songs. I don't want your millions, mister. I don't want your diamond ring. All I want is a right to live, mister. Give me back my job again. We helped to build this country, mister. Why you enjoyed a life of ease. You've stolen all we worked for, mister. Now our babies starve and freeze. I don't want your millions, mister. I don't want your diamond ring. All I want is the right to live, mister. Give me back my job again. Call me dumb if you wish, mister. Call me green or blue or red. There's just one thing that I know, mister. My hungry baby must be fed. I don't want your millions, mister. I don't want your diamond ring. All I want is the right to live, mister. Give me back my job again. No, I don't want your Rolls Royce, mister. I don't want your pleasure yacht. All I want is food for my baby. Give me back that job I lost. I don't want your millions, mister. I don't want your diamond ring. All I want is the right to live, mister. Give me back my job again.